Good afternoon, everybody. I will call this meeting to order at 1:05 p.m. and begin by acknowledging with gratitude that we live and work on the traditional unceded territory of Squamish, whose people have been stewards of these lands and waters surrounding Lekwungen, Bowen Island. Welcome to the Bowen Island Municipality meeting of Monday, January 27th, 2025. And thank you for joining. I'm Andrew Leonard, the Mayor of Bowen Island Municipality and the chair of this meeting. I'd like to start, as we always do, by introducing the other elected members of our council here today. Starting on my far right, we have Councillor and Islands Trustee Sue Ellen Fast. To her left is Councillor and Islands Trustee Judy Getty. To my far left is Councillor John Saunders, and to his right is Councillor Alison Morse. We are also joined by several members of our professional staff team here this afternoon, including our Chief Administrative Officer, Kieran Dillon, our Corporate Officer, Sophie Insignia, and other staff who may be presenting agenda items here this afternoon. This meeting is being recorded, and when members of the public speak during the public comment and question and answer portions of the meeting, your presence and voice will be included in the permanent recording, which will be available at bowenislandmunicipality.ca and is streaming live on our YouTube channel, where it will be kept for posterity. This council is an official forum for the conducting of the business of local government. We all love our home and we're all passionate about what happens in this community. I'd encourage everyone to maintain a constructive and respectful tone during the meeting and direct comments for council during the public comment or Q&A portions of the meeting to myself. The agenda and full council package for those folks who would like to follow along is available at bowenislandmunicipality.ca. And I just saw Councillor Alex Jurgensen. I don't know if he was coming into the room or might need some assistance, but he will be joining us here momentarily. Temporarily lost quorum, so we'll just give it a moment here. Yeah. Check. And with that, I will look for a motion. I'll look first to our corporate officer for the additional any late items here today.
There are no late items.
No late items. And with that, I will look for a motion to adopt the agenda. Moved by Councillor Getty, seconded by Councillor Saunders. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. Unanimously. Moving on to public comments, I'll look to our corporate officer for public comments here today.
There are no public comments.
No public comments, no delegations, and moving on to the consent agenda, I will look to council for items they would like to remove or pull from the consent agenda. Going twice, going 3 times. Can I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda, please? Moved by Councillor Getty, seconded by Councillor Morse. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. Moving on to section 8, staff reports 8.1, Bowen Island Conservancy Protective Covenant for Cape Project Curtis lands. We have Daniel Martin, our manager of planning and development, joining us here today.
Yeah, so I'm here to present my report on a proposed protective covenant on lands owned by the Bowen Island Conservancy at Cape Project Curtis. So yeah, as proposed before you is a protective covenant for lands newly purchased in I think October of last year with the Bowen Island Conservancy, and the covenant would be to protect the land from future development. So it's things like the lands being used for dwellings or future development permits, trails, and interpretive centers. So by way of context, in September of 2023, the municipality and the Conservancy entered into a memorandum of understanding to establish a framework of collaboration between our two organizations. And one of the things specifically called for in the MOU is for them to assist in drafting, placing, and holding conservation covenants on lands owned by the Conservancy. So to that end, we've entered into already 2 protective covenants with the Conservancy. So one at the Wild Coast Nature Refuge covenant and one on the Armstrong lands off Dorman Road, and to be a 3rd proposed covenant for these newly purchased lands. And other background, there is a conservation covenant already held on these lands by Metro Vancouver Regional District or Metro. The Metro covenant is identical to the proposed covenant that's before you. So they both seek to preserve and protect the natural ecosystem, biological diversity, and natural values of the land. But we still see value in the municipality holding that covenant as well for our own control, and also that we are better placed to enforce some aspects of the covenant, especially regarding permitting or especially building permits. So the recommendation before you is that council authorize the mayor and corporate officer to enter into a protective covenant for the Bowen Island Conservancy owned lots. Thank you, Dr. Curtis. Lots 23 to 31, 51, and lot C through F. Thank you. Any questions?
Thanks. To the chair, the lots that we're talking about are all contiguous, so I suspect this isn't an issue, but is there any risk of somebody coming back at us who buys one of the other lots should Metro choose to sell them and say, well, wait a minute, that's kind of impacting how we can do things on this? Is there any risk of that at all?
Through the chair, I don't see any risk. Like in some ways, this covenant means that there'll be less happening on those lots than there otherwise would be.
On the outside, the lots that aren't ours.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I would guess is. Thanks.
Councilor Goody.
Any chance of there being a mention of no camping?
Through the chair, the zoning currently does not permit camping. And so I think the covenant just speaks to sort of development, which would probably encompass campsites. Would be, a form of development and use of the lot that the covenant prohibits.
Has that been discussed? Has that been any part of the negotiations?
It has not been. Essentially, this covenant that's before you is almost identical to the ones we hold on the other conservancy land. The only addition, I think, is it permits the removal of hazardous trees. And then it is identical to the one that Metro holds as well. So we're one for consistency.
Thank you.
Councilor Fast.
Thank you. I'm not bothered by it not containing language about camping because it's the zoning and staff can always do all kinds of education and information since it's not allowed. So this covenant I think is great and I'd be prepared to make the motion.
Okay, I saw a half hand raised, I think, by Councilor Morris.
I guess I was just wondering about the hazardous trees one. Do we need to put something in that the tree is deemed hazardous by a registered arborist? Given the conservancy, I sort of don't think it's necessary that they're only gonna do it if it's a safety risk.
I know we have standards for hazard tree exemptions in our development permits, and we'll probably be using similar standard that, yes, we look for. Like our development permit guidelines don't say an arborist needs to confirm it's a hazardous tree, but we sort of will approach people and say, well, how do we know it's hazardous unless like somebody else has deemed it that way? And same with other covenants that we have with hazardous tree exemptions.
Councilor Jurgensen.
I'd just like to thank you, Brian Martin, for all the work that your department has done on this covenant and just invite the thought around the table to be the Conservancy currently holds these lands. This covenant registered against title. If the Conservancy was ever to sell these lands, we can't make the assumption that the future owner would do something the Conservancy wouldn't do currently. So just I don't see anything that kind of strikes me as need to be changed at the moment, but I just wanted to invite that thought around the table.
Councilor Jurgensen. And back to you, Councilor Fast.
Thank you. I'd like to move the motion that council authorize mayor and corporate officer to enter into a protective covenant for the Bowen Island Conservancy owned lots on Cape Roger Curtis Road, legally described as lots 22 to 33, and 51. District lot 1548, Group 1, New Westminster District Plan, BCP, as written on the motion.
Moved by Councilor Fast, seconded by Councilor Getty. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. That carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Martin. Moving on to section 10, reports of committees, county commissions. 10.1, recommendation of the Public Art Advisory Committee regarding the Bike Barn mural. We have our Manager of Recreation and Community Services, Jillian Drake, joining us here on this side.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm here to present on behalf of the Public Art Advisory Committee, seeking approval to implement a new art piece on the island. So this proposal is related to a graffiti style small mural proposed to be located in the Bike Barn, which is on the north dock at Snug Cove Ferry Terminal. This project is one that was initiated by this artist who came and knocked on the door here, knocked on the door at the Hearth, and was referred to the committee as a means of potentially implementing it. He would like to donate his time and just have the costs of the materials covered. So for the benefits of community watching this, I thought I would just show the first few slides of the presentation that is included in the staff report. Share screen. This is a presentation that the individual brought to the Public Art Advisory Committee to describe what his proposal, this unit of this art would look like. This is what we mean by a graffiti style art piece. So this is the proposed look of the art. It's essentially using plywood sheets. So those are an 8 by 4 foot dimension. So for those sheets, 16 feet along, the inspiration is drawn by our brand colors, color palette there, and the deer as well, you can see in there. This is the proposed location at the Bike Barn. The sizing of it would be that it came all the way to a foot up off the ground. There's no concern with the committee or the artist that the bikes would be blocking the view, the bikes might hit the art. Any of that is all within the sort of the capacity of the art to withstand those that ways that public may interface with it. This proposal, this location was proposed, and the style of art was proposed by the artist really to draw more appeal to a different demographic of the islands that may not be engaged with public art currently. And that's one of the components of the cultural master plan that this project would hit, because it would be designed and created by an islander in his 20s, and it's very much of a different style of art to broaden what we do on the islands. The cost of the art, the proposal that you see, the budget proposed by the artist that's included in this report was upgraded a little bit by the committee, suggesting that marine grade plywood is used, for example, that's pre-treated on all sides. So this location, gets the salt water and air from below and the sides. So upgrading the style of the type of plywood would just increase the longevity of it. And the cost of this coming in under $1,000 is part of the proposed budget allocation being brought into operating or capital funding this year within the public art reserve.
Thank you, Ms. Drake. Over to you, Councillor Morrison.
I think this is a great idea. I have 2 comments. I'm not sure that we want to actually contract with him rather than we're permitting him to do the art. And the other is because the funding is coming from a reserve fund, I think we need a council resolution to take money out of the reserve fund.
Through the chair, I would defer to all of you in terms of that resolution process, but what I believe to be the case was that with that potential reallocation of the 40,000 from the reserve into use this year, that this would be within that. But if we do it,
Well, we haven't approved the budget.
Right.
Yet, and we haven't approved. So I think just to be safe, we should just add at the end with the funding for supplies to come from the public art. And that's very clear to the public as well, that we're not funding out of the general budget.
right.
And are you actually going to write a written contract with them? Or are you going to just send them a letter to say council's approved you doing mural as presented?
Well, we would enter into an agreement with All Arts that is acquired by the municipality in terms of then having clarity around ownership and maintenance requirements.
Okay, so then maybe it should say that council approve entering into an agreement with Simon Chavez to create a 16 by 8 mural. That's that. Okay.
Looking staff for that.
Yes.
I'm seeing a nod from our corporate officer.
Did you get all my?
Yes.
Good. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Getty, followed by Councillor Saunders.
The other thing that was discussed was that the Hearth was interested in trying to contact some other artists on the island that have experience painting murals to give him some sort of a mentorship contact if he's got any questions or needs any kind of help. So I think that's also the role of the Hearth that is worth mentioning.
Councillor Saunders.
Thanks, Chair. Just to clarify, this is someone who lives here. The
Yes.
artist. Okay, great. I assume that was the case, but kind of further to what Councillor Getty said, one of my concerns about it, and it's not a major concern, was that other artists might go, well, how come it's not me? And in advance of that ever happening, was this fella took the initiative to come and approach your organization, approach everybody you had to approach and get it done. I kind of admire that gumption, and I think we should reward it, actually.
Picking up the word gumption.
Yeah. I got a lot to
I'll move the motion if Sophie wants to read out again what we conjured up.
Yes, so what I have kind of amended on the fly here was that council approve entering into an agreement with Simeon Deutschenow to create a 16 by 8 foot mural to be installed in the BIM bike shed at the ferry terminal as recommended by the Public Art Advisory Committee, the December 16, 2024 meeting, with the funding for supplies coming from the Public Art Reserve Fund.
Move that.
Okay, moved by Councillor Morse, seconded by Councillor Jurgensen. Any further discussion? Councillor Fast.
I'm in support of this. I think it's a great initiative. Not only will it be useful for the cultural master plan, and I remember the mural that used to be under the big school there before it was painted over, and very encouraging for young people. That particular muralist who had been a student there went on to a career in the arts. And anyway, I also think it encourages and supports our transportation plan and our active transportation plan in terms of highlighting that location and the function being important and inspiring for everybody to explore and think about it in a positive, creative way. So I'm in favor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fast. Seeing no further discussion, I will call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. And that carries unanimously. Rocketing along to new business, 11.1, updates to council from my end on Metro Vancouver business, as well as Translink Mayor's Council. Metro Vancouver has just gotten back underway with its meetings. There was a mayor's committee meeting held on January 17th, which was the open portion was shorter. The highlights really, I think, are around Chair Hurley starting to get some sense of where a governance review of the organization is going to, how that's going to take place, how it's going to move forward. As you can imagine, there is a lot of differing opinions on governance in Metro Vancouver, both from the public as well as from board members itself. So stay tuned on how that unfolds. There was, we had a special board meeting last week, which was category special. Yes, it was interesting in that the intent of the board meeting was to deal with some motions that came forward in the last year around Metro Vancouver's budget. And I think a number of side conversations the chair has had with unnamed board members who say that we shouldn't be in this, that Metro Vancouver shouldn't be in this area of business or that area of business. So he called a meeting and said, okay, well, you know, all you folks have said this to me. What do you want to cut? And then there was what felt like replay of some of the greatest hits that Metro Vancouver directors had over the last year or so, but no resolutions were made. And ultimately, we were an hour and a half into the meeting, and I realized we weren't going anywhere. So I just made a motion to receive their report and moved on. So I'll be curious to see how the budget process for 2026 unfolds in Metro Vancouver. I think, despite some of the what's out there in the public about Metro Vancouver, like at the end of the day, the previous chair had a financial task force. They brought the household impact for the tax burden of the Metro Vancouver portion of our bills way down already from double digits, and they're set to go down to about 5% starting in 2027. So a lot of that financial work has been done. I think there's still some room for operational efficiencies, but all in all, seems like Metro Vancouver is getting its financial house in order despite some of their large projects that they're wrestling with. TransLink, so news on TransLink. As many of you know, we originally had a meeting scheduled with MP Weiler here today. He had what sounded like a command performance to appear at the Mayor's Council TransLink event, which happened at Lonsdale at I think 11:30 this morning, where there was an announcement from the federal government about the Canada Public Transit Fund coming to fruition, and TransLink has been allocated $663 million over the next 10 years. So, not insignificant amount of money, and through the baseline fund, so about $60 million a year going to TransLink. However, there's still that larger funding gap to deal with TransLink's operational deficit that needs to come to pass, and the Mayor's Council does have a letter in to the Pacific Caucus of the federal government to expedite a metro area contribution of Canada Public Transit Fund. So we'll keep our ears peeled on that, but I did get our regrets from MP Wilder. He did wish he could be here today, but it sounded like his appearance was beyond its control. So he's there now. I don't think any questions that folks have about Metro or TransLink. Not seeing any. We'll move along to updates from our Islands trustees, Trustee Getty and Trustee Fast.
Okay, I've got a few notes, and Trustee Getty will fill in any gaps, I'm sure. As of last week, Trustee Getty and I are both on the Financial Planning Committee at Islands Trust, and I'm the chair. Surprised. I was surprised. We see in 12.9 and 12.10 in the information items now that we're part of Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities. Bowen Island Municipality will be able to, councillors will be able, and staff will be able to interact better with Islands Trust, because that's where their main membership is too. And the letters to the mayor from Islands Trust Chair Buckham are there in 12.10. And I met with the new CAO, Ruben Broley, for half an hour this morning. I gather you've done that weeks ago. And this morning we were in a session on reconciliation learning group as well. But otherwise, things are gearing up for the March meeting of Islands Trust, where the budget will be passed or not. So I'm really looking forward to that. And now, oh, there's one more thing I forgot. Oh, well, can't remember what it was. Oh, we have another, we had another committee of the whole about the trust policy statement. And I've submitted a couple of things. Between Judy and I, we've got about 3 more additions to the trust policy statement that we're bringing. That's it.
Thank you, Trustee Fast. Over to you.
Bowen Island is really solidly embedded in all the committees and the executive work, except for the executive committee. So there was a vacancy on the financial planning committee, and several people put their names in, and Sue Ellen was appointed by the executive committee. And then when the committee met, we voted and she was chair. So we've got all sorts of time and energy to put into the trust budget, and in particular overall, but in particular also what's going on with the Bowen part of that. And there's a number of these the committee of the whole meetings are new for the trust, but there's a whole bunch of them that have been set up in terms of going through the proposed policy statement, one paragraph at a time to try and fine tune that. So we're and that process, because it's a whole lot of extra meetings, is having trouble getting quorum. And luckily Sue Ellen and I are attending all of those meetings, so we're getting all sorts of input into that process as well. So the budget and the policy, we both showed up at the reconciliation training meeting this morning, and they're trying to figure out what steps to take to go forward. There's I think it's 5 people that attended regularly to the previous program that, and we're trying to figure out ways of getting more training and more information to a larger group, that we need to figure out ways of expanding that with all the budget constraints. The CAO has been hired and the committee continues, the hiring committee, because it works well together, and we're trying to figure out how to do a review, a 6-month review and an annual review, and set that up in terms of what the actual parameters will look like. And I'm still chair of the governance committee, and we've got a meeting coming up this Wednesday. And we're trying to deal with a plan to present to the whole of the trust board to figure out the information that they might want from the governance review that happened in 2022. That's come up at the trust council in terms of a concern that we haven't spent enough time on that with this council. So we're trying to figure out how to present that. So that's 5 major committees and activities that we're involved with, and it's time consuming, but we're well represented.
Councilor Morris.
So I, having been on the financial planning committee, I'm always interested in what's going on there, and I happened to look at their last meeting and January 22nd. And one paragraph in the initial staff report on the 2025-26 budget says, the BIM tax levy is calculated at $469,970, which is higher than the previous draft budget amount of $461,330. The current budget figure represents an increase over the prior year levy of 20.1%. To me, that's totally unsatisfactory. And there's an awful lot we could do in our capital budget with $461,000. So I have not seen any detail of how that number was calculated. And unfortunately, I don't know if Kristen has or not because she's sick. So it would be interesting to actually see the backup detail. And it isn't in the package for the trust committee.
Over to Councilor Hitch.
I find that to be a very provocative kind of statement. So there's, in terms of the legislation and the agreement, it would be very, very difficult to get out of $460,000, right? That would take us out of the Islands Trust. And I don't know that that's necessarily on the agenda. The increase of 20%, as opposed to the other islands having something like 6% or something. It's very shocking and it's really hard. But if you've been on the financial planning committee, then you know and you remember that it's a totally different calculation in terms of part of the budget, not a huge section, and the numbers and the value of the properties on Bowen. And so between the two of us, and Sue Ellen's only just come on to the committee, but we're working very closely with our CFO and going through every single number on this month, or the 5-year financial plan, in terms of figuring out where and what can be challenged and what can be debated once it gets in front of the whole of the trust council. So what we're dealing with is that most of our money goes to the activities of the Conservancy, not most, but a lot of it. And those are the things that Bowen actually values the most out of all of the activities of the Islands Trust. So if we go after cutting back on those, we're cutting our own nose to spite our face. In terms of all of the other expenses, in terms of programs, we're going through and trying to figure out how to fine tune what it is that is related to planning that we're not responsible for and we're not contributing to, and tease that out. So there's the director of finances for the trust and our CFO are having more conversations than they've ever had. And we're teasing it all out as much as we possibly can. So the debate that will come up at the March trust meeting is whether any and all or none of the new programming initiatives will go forward. And one of the things that the trust is doing is with the strategic and corporate planning is to prioritize that. So it's not everybody's wish list. That there's got to be limits in terms of what the staff are actually capable of doing. So those are the detailed conversations that we're going to with. It's not an increase of 461. And yes, we could always do something else with that. It's an increase of $6,000 or $7,000, and whether or not that's fair, reasonable, justified, and whether we can defend suggestions to cut back on that.
I get to rebut.
Councilor Morris.
I'm very familiar with how the legislation works. I'm also very familiar with the fact that what goes in which pot of the 3 pots is very much up to the trust. And I think there's room to put a lot more into the local planning pot than is in there. And also, the other thing that has always bothered me from day one is it's very clear in the Islands Trust Act that everything that's held by the trust fund board, it belongs to the province. And therefore, we're funding a provincial responsibility with our taxes, which we should not be doing.
Councilor Bass.
I just recall our CFO mentioned at our recent committee of the whole that this figure represents 3 cents on the dollar that Bowen Island taxpayers pay. And most of the Islands Trust Conservancy nature reserves also have covenants on them by the local municipality in our case, or regional districts. So they're very secure. And that's a good value, I think, for Bowen Island. So we're part of the nature reserve system through the islands. And we've got 3 of them here on Bowen. I didn't want to say more than that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, and it's probably apt then that we will have the Islands Trust Executive Committee coming to the island here to visit council. It sounds like we might have some robust and constructive and frank discussion on some of these relationship pieces, be they cultural, financial, planning, whatever it is. So we'll look forward to that in April. I believe it is.
April 30th.
April 30th is when we're going to see that meeting. All right, not seeing any further questions or comments. I will look to our corporate officer for Q&A. Is there anybody here?
There are no participants online.
Anybody in the gallery here? Councilor Getty.
I'm just going on to 14.
Okay. And with that, I will look for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councilor Getty, seconded by Councilor Jurgensen. All in favor, raise your hands. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Councilor Saunders in opposition.
He was, I put that.
Your hand up and then you made a noise when I said opposed. And we are adjourned. So we'll just have a very short break, I guess, and we'll come back at 1:45 for the closed meeting.
Maybe our shortest